Did you just call me a glorified table cleaner with a good smile? In front of all these people? The entire cafe froze, cups midair, spoons suspended. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. No one had ever stood up to Preston Larrington. Not the manager, not the mayor, not even the cops. Until this morning, when a 22-year-old black waitress with trembling hands and a fire in her voice dared to say what everyone else was too afraid to. This story will shake you. It's about power, silence, and the day someone finally broke both. Support this channel by clicking that like button, subscribing, and turning on your notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Did you just call me a glorified table cleaner with a good smile? Danielle's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from holding back too long. Preston Larrington chuckled, low and cruel, as if the insult had been a joke shared between old friends. Except it wasn't. It was public, loud, echoing through the polished tiles and clinking porcelain of Bloom and Ember, the upscale cafe tucked into the heart of uptown Boston. He leaned back in his corner booth, gold cufflinks glinting, espresso untouched. Everyone in the room had turned. Everyone always turned when Preston spoke, because if you didn't, he'd make sure you'd regret it. Danielle didn't move, her notepad still in hand, apron slightly dusted with flour from the morning shift, name tag a little crooked like her life. She stood still, tall and quiet, while Preston crossed one leg over the other and added with a smirk, "Don't take it personal, sweetheart. You're just a passing face, a pair of hands. I barely notice your kind." There it was, that word, kind. Not race, not class, but the sneering everything else hidden behind it. Danielle inhaled slowly. The cafe was packed. College students, executives, tourists, staff, everyone frozen. Her manager, Curtis, peeked from behind the counter with eyes that pleaded, "Don't make this worse. Just walk away. It's not worth it." But it was, and Danielle knew that now. She hadn't always been like this. She'd spent her life ducking conflict, smiling past disrespect, letting people like Preston throw money on the table and buy silence. But something in her snapped today. Maybe it was the fact that her rent was due and her car broke down. Maybe it was the memory of her mom, worn hands, aching back, working doubles to raise her. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because Preston had looked her in the face and called her invisible. 6 hours earlier, the alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. Danielle rolled out of bed with a wince. Her shoulder was still sore from the tray that collapsed on her 2 nights ago. She hadn't told Curtis because, well, she couldn't afford to get cut from the weekend rotation. Bloom and Ember was her 4th cafe job in the past 2 years. The only one that paid just enough to cover a tiny 1-bedroom with stained ceilings and a stubborn radiator. She didn't mind the work. She loved people. She loved the rhythm of service, the order of it, the chaos. But what she didn't love was him. Preston Larrington, the cafe's unofficial king, tech millionaire. Regular table. Same order. Double espresso, no sugar, 2 egg white croissants, a seat with his back to the window, and a mouth that never stopped giving staff a reason to cry in the stockroom. The first time Danielle met him, she'd greeted him with, "Good morning, sir. What can I get started for you?" He didn't respond, just waved her off like a fly. The second time, she brought his croissants with a smile. He glanced at her name tag and said, "Danielle, that's cute. My housekeeper's daughter has a name like that. Must be popular where you're from." The third time, she asked if he wanted jam. He leaned in and whispered, "Just bring me the food. Leave the charm for someone who needs it." She'd told herself to ignore it, to push through, that people like him don't matter in the long run. But today wasn't like the other days. Nicer riste, goristek lucht, randa batgiters tong, sing, the dishwasher. She had just brewed the second pot of dark roast when her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. "Payment not received. I'll be changing the locks on Monday." Another buzz. Her mechanic, 64T, no payment, no pickup. Danielle swallowed hard. Her chest tightened. She shoved the phone in her apron. She was still standing in the storage closet when Curtis came in. "Hey, Danielle, table 9's here." Her stomach dropped. Preston. She brought the tray out like she'd done 100 times before. He was already there, arms stretched, phone in hand, scrolling like the world owed him something. He didn't look up. She placed the cup down gently. "Your espresso, sir." Nothing. Then she placed the napkin beside it. still silent. But when she turned to walk away, he finally said without even lifting his gaze, "Make sure the table's wiped down this time. I don't want to see another fingerprint. I'm not tipping a glorified table cleaner." Danielle stopped mid-step. Something in the way he said it, the tone, the boredom, the entitlement. She turned slowly. "I'm sorry, sir. What did you say?" He looked up. "You heard me." And then came the sentence that cracked the air like a thunderclap. "Did you just call me a glorified table cleaner with a good smile?" Now, present moment. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the regulars, Mr. Peters with his crossword puzzle, Marlene with her dog purse, were frozen, eyes darting between Danielle and Preston. The sound of someone recording with their phone quietly clicked in the distance. Curtis was already walking toward her. "Danielle," he hissed under his breath. "Not here. Not now." Preston leaned forward, completely unbothered. "You gonna cry? Or are you finally gonna admit what you are?" And that's when Danielle did the one thing no one ever dared to do. She stepped forward and sat down in the seat across from him, straight across the table, like an equal. Her voice was quiet, but it cut like glass. "You think your money gives you the right to shrink people? You walk in here every day like you own the oxygen, and the truth is, you don't even know how to breathe without someone else handing you air." Gasps, real ones. Even Curtis paused. Preston's face hardened. "You want to get fired, is that it?" Danielle smiled. "No, I want you to see me. Lock Shrown." The door chimed. A delivery driver walked in, glanced around, sensed the tension, and walked back out. Danielle didn't move. "I've watched you, Mr. Larrington. I've seen the way you treat people. Not just me. The kid at the register, the barista with a limp, the cleaner you once told to stay out of your light. You don't see people. You see servants." Preston's lips tightened. "Be careful." Danielle nodded slowly. "You should have been careful the day you decided I was small." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Anger or fear? Curtis finally broke through. "Danielle, that's enough, please." But the room was different now. A woman near the window clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed. But a man near the door joined in. A slow, quiet clap, then another, until half the cafe was applauding. Not loud, not riotous, just enough. Preston stood abruptly, knocking the cup over. Espresso spilled across the white tablecloth. He didn't say a word, just reached into his coat, pulled out a black card, and tossed it onto the table. "Charge it," then stormed out the door. The room exhaled. Danielle remained seated, hands shaking, eyes wet, but she didn't cry. She smiled. Curtis stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Dintret you, out haar porta krasterily. Cracking, terzel saft, trum Preston eli bengbol satan bucka orphan says. Term around, terzel plein, broadschaft de devlit the calf. These will be, these turkulm to the points. One for Mingle, a turning point. But little did Danielle know, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because within 48 hours, that quiet confrontation would become the most talked about viral video in the city, sparking a firestorm, igniting a truth much bigger than a cafe, and dragging everything including Preston's past into the public eye. Trimpodio didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch, legs tucked beneath her, phone buzzing every few minutes, each ping louder than the last. Her video had gone viral. 2.4 million views in 12 hours. At first it was just a coworker who shared it. Then someone clipped the audio. Then came the reactions. Stitch after stitch on TikTok, duets on YouTube, Twitter threads, Reddit debates, headlines. Waitress destroys arrogant millionaire with one sentence. The moment that silenced Preston Larrington. Who is Danielle Reese, the woman who sat down and spoke up? Danielle watched in stunned silence, as strangers called her brave, iconic, a symbol of grace under fire. But to her, it didn't feel like courage. It felt like collapse, like everything had cracked at once. She hadn't meant for it to go public. She hadn't even noticed who was filming. Now, everyone knew. The next morning, she walked into Bloom and Ember and stopped cold. Curtis was waiting at the door, his face unreadable. Next to him stood a clean-cut man in a navy blue suit, bald, polished shoes, a tablet in his hand. "Danielle," Curtis said quietly, "this is Mr. Huxley. He's corporate." She blinked. "Corporate." Huxley nodded without smiling. "We've received considerable attention. The video, the press, the blowback." "Blowback," she echoed. Curtis shifted, uneasy. "Some investors are threatening to pull out. Preston's lawyers are—" Danielle felt the floor tilt. "We're putting you on temporary leave. With pay," Huxley added quickly. "This is for your protection, and ours." Danielle stared at them. "You're suspending me?" "Not suspending. Curtis insisted, just giving it time to settle. Danielle's jaw clenched. He insults me, publicly humiliates me, and I get sent home? It's just until things calm down, Huxley said. You understand? She didn't, but she nodded anyway. Rant up dowers. Closed me. Defaultisch prendio. Project dowers. Persam fultrant quotient emper insatuap to I click you. You understand? Danielle couldn't think. She turned off her phone, stuffed it in her bag, and boarded the 76 bus. No plan, no destination, just movement. She stared out the window, replaying every word from that day. You don't see people, you see servants. She hadn't even planned that line. It had just come out, from somewhere deep, somewhere tired. Persam fultram, persam plower m. An hour later, she found herself on a bench at Franklin Park. The trees swayed, kids laughed in the distance. She closed her eyes and breathed. Blonde voice behind her. Excuse me, are you Danielle Reese? She opened her eyes. A woman stood there, late 30s, brown skin, red box braids, a denim jacket. She looked nervous. Danielle hesitated, then nodded. The woman sat beside her, slowly. I just wanted to say, thank you. Danielle blinked. For what? The woman looked down at her hands. I used to clean Preston's house. Danielle's breath caught. I lasted 5 months. Couldn't take it. The way he spoke, treated us like trash. I once heard him tell his son that our kind was only loyal if paid hourly. Danielle swallowed. You have a name. Latoya. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Latoya reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. You need to see this. Danielle unfolded it. It was a court document. Preston Larrington versus former housekeeper, wrongful termination, emotional distress. Case settled out of court. You're not the first, Latoya said softly, but you might be the first to be heard. Danielle stared at the paper, and in that moment, she understood. This wasn't just about her. This was about all of them. By the following week, Danielle's face was everywhere. Podcasts, news panels, invitations to speak on workplace dignity, class bias, racial microaggressions. It was overwhelming. People expected her to have a platform, a message, a movement. But Danielle was still that same woman who woke up at 5:15 a.m. just to keep the lights on. So she said yes and no. She picked carefully, but something else had started to gnaw at her. Preston was silent. No statements, no public appearances, no interviews. And yet, he hadn't disappeared. Danielle's inbox filled with cryptic messages, some supportive, others threatening, anonymous emails. One read, "Careful girl, he's not done." Another, "You don't know who you embarrassed." She told herself it was just noise, internet nonsense, until her landlord called. "Miss Reese, are you suing someone?" "No." "Well, someone paid your rent." 6 months. Cash. No name. She froze. "And the mechanic?" "He said someone paid off your car repairs." In full. Danielle stood in the middle of her apartment, heart thudding. Who would? Her phone rang. Curtis. "Danielle, we need to talk. Now." They met at a diner on Tremont Street. Curtis looked pale, disheveled, not like his usual calm self. "Listen," he said quietly. "You can't trust everything you're seeing. Preston's not just rich. He's connected." Danielle leaned in. "What do you mean?" Curtis lowered his voice. "He doesn't go down. Ever. He's had lawsuits disappear. He donated a building to the city after one case, bought off a DA in another. His dad used to sit on the board of 3 judges. Danielle felt her mouth go dry. Curtis continued. "And that video, that clip, he's trying to get it taken down across all platforms. He's claiming defamation." She exhaled shakily. "But I didn't lie. I didn't R. I know. But he's playing dirty. He's trying to flip the narrative. Word is he's hiring someone to dig into your past." Danielle's heart dropped. "What past?" Curtis hesitated, then looked down. "You ever tell anyone who your father was?" Her blood froze. For years Danielle had kept her family history buried. Her mother, a nurse, raised her alone. Always careful, always cautious. She never spoke about Danielle's father except to say he made mistakes, and were better off. But Danielle knew. His name was Michael Rohn, convicted of embezzlement and insider trading in the early 2000s, former executive at Larrington Enterprises. Yes, Preston's father was once Michael Rohn's boss, and Michael went down for a scandal that ruined hundreds of lives. But Danielle remembered something her mom said once years ago, after a quiet argument in the kitchen. Your father wasn't perfect, but he wasn't the only one guilty. Danielle's head spun. Could Preston know? Was that why he was trying to destroy her? Was this deeper than a cafe insult? Back home, Danielle opened her closet and dug out the shoebox she hadn't touched in years. Inside, photos, letters,
A torn company badge. Michael Rowan, VP, Barrington Enterprises. One letter stood out. Written from prison. Danielle, if you're reading this, it means your mother kept her promise. I just want you to know. I didn't fall alone. I took the blame because I had to, but I wasn't the only one who knew. Preston's father signed off on every single deal. My silence bought your freedom. Danielle's breath caught. The room tilted. This wasn't just personal. This was generational. Preston slept that night. Again. She watched the city lights flicker, and made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. And she definitely wouldn't be silent. Because this wasn't just about spilled espresso or whispered insults. This was about truth. All of it. And someone was going to hear it.
3 days later, Michael sat quietly at his kitchen table. His hands, the same ones that used to steer fighter jets through enemy airspace, trembled as he held his coffee mug. Not from fear, from something deeper. Wounds of the body heal. But what about wounds you can't see? His wife Renee placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. They're calling again, she whispered. CNN, BBC, even Al Jazeera. Everyone wants to talk to you. Michael didn't move. I didn't do anything. Renee sat across from him. Exactly. Silence again. The kind that fills a room after too many truths have been swallowed whole. That night, Julia called. Not from her White House office, from her home. With her voice low and urgent. I've spoken to the Inspector General, she said. The footage is being reviewed. Internal Affairs wants your statement. And Michael, the President knows. Michael laughed, bitter, tired. Now he knows, because I got slammed into the ground in front of his advisor? No, she replied softly, because I made him watch the body cam. Michael sat up. What? I forced it onto the agenda this morning, she said. I told them if they ignored it, I'd go public. Fully. On record, and I'm not the only one. There are others. Something shifted in Michael's chest. A flicker. Hope? No, too soon. Internal Affairs wants to meet you tomorrow, she said. They're bringing in both officers for questioning. Michael agreed, not because he believed in justice, but because he owed it to the quiet boy inside him who had learned to lower his gaze every time a uniform walked by. The hearing room was cold and small. Across the table sat the two officers. No badges today, just navy blue suits and faces that couldn't decide if they were embarrassed or annoyed. The lead investigator, a black woman named Detective Price, tapped her pen. Mr. Thompson, when the officers ordered you out of the car, what did you feel was happening? Michael met her eyes. I felt like I was about to become another hashtag. A long pause. The shorter officer, the one with the cigarette that day, shifted in his seat. I didn't mean anything by it. We get reports all the time of stolen government vehicles. Did you run the plates? Price interrupted. He hesitated. No, we were going to. Before or after pulling a gun on a federal employee? Silence. The taller officer spoke next. We followed procedure. Price turned to him. Is that why you ignored the badge held out by a national security advisor? Another pause. I didn't recognize her face. Didn't recognize her black driver either, Michael muttered. The room tightened. I've spent my whole life in service, Michael continued. From piloting in Kandahar to driving White House officials, I've got clearances that most people in this building would dream of. And yet, in your eyes, I was just a threat. Price nodded slowly. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That's all for now. But it wasn't over. That evening, Julia appeared on live television. Her voice was steady. Her expression was fire. I was in that vehicle, she said to millions of viewers. And I watched a man be brutalized, not for what he did, but for how he looked. I work in national security, but there's no threat greater to America than the fear we carry in our own neighborhoods. We cannot claim to stand for freedom abroad when we allow racism to thrive at home. The clip went viral, and for once, it didn't vanish. The Department of Justice launched a full investigation. The police chief issued a public apology. The officers were suspended without pay pending review. But more importantly, it changed something deeper. A few weeks later, Michael stood in front of a crowd at the NAACP's annual gala. He hadn't wanted to speak. He hated the spotlight. But Julia nudged him forward, so he did. I never wanted to be a symbol, he began. I just wanted to do my job. But life doesn't always let us choose our battles. Sometimes the battle chooses us. He looked out at the audience. I was once taught that silence keeps you safe, that blending in is survival. But I'm here to say, you can be dignified, educated, disciplined, and still be dehumanized in broad daylight. A murmur passed through the room. But I'm also here to say we are not powerless. Every voice matters. Every camera matters. Every witness matters. And justice is not a gift. It's something we demand. Applause erupted, not loud at first, but then rising like a wave. Julia smiled from the front row, not because of what he said, but because he'd finally said it. The officers never returned to active duty. One of them later resigned quietly. The other fought the charges and lost. Michael never drove for the White House again, but not because they fired him. He quit. He took a job as a speaker, visiting schools, veteran groups and police academies, not to rant, not to blame, but to teach, to tell his story, and to remind America that sometimes the people we fear most are the ones protecting us in silence. How many people like Michael never get to tell their story? How many stay silent because the world has already made up its mind? What would you have done if you were in Julia's shoes? Or Michael's? Let us know in the comments. We read every word. Don't forget to like this video if it moved you, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be told. Subscribe and hit that bell icon, because you never know whose story we'll tell next.